Well, folks, in today's video, we're going to be unboxing and working on a 1950s interurban doodlebug, some sort of piece of equipment which was actually kit bashed. I don't really know a whole lot about this locomotive or whatever it is, but I was basically just browsing eBay a couple months ago. I found it. And I put in a bid, I think for around $25, and I ended up winning the auction. So yeah, we'll get this thing out of the box, we'll see what kind of condition it's in, and then we'll try to fix it, all in the same video. I am super excited to see what this thing looks like. Alright, so the seller organized all the parts right here. And this should be the locomotive itself. And there it is. Check this thing out. You really don't see a lot of stuff like this. I think it was built out of a kit. However, you can see that the frame of it is actually made out of wood, which is something that you don't see too often anymore. The drive appears to be out of a Varney locomotive. It's got a rear bogie. This is missing some parts. Hopefully we've already got those. But yeah, I just thought this looked like a very interesting piece of equipment and something that I'd want to own. I love this stuff from the 1950s, and it's not in perfect shape, as you can see, but hopefully we can get this thing running again. There's just something fascinating about this. Now, before we go repairing anything, I just want to quickly mend the rear truck because this is responsible for picking up power. Many engines of this era use a system where one truck picks up power from one rail and the other from the opposite rail. And we appear to have the parts right here, which is perfect. We'll get the wheels out of the bag and then we'll just get that all reassembled. And then we'll actually be able to figure out if this drive works. Judging that it's a Varney, I think it's actually got a fair shake, but it's almost undoubtedly going to need maintenance, just because of its age. A lot of these engines, you know, they just need oil and cleaning really, but we just want to make sure everything's in order. I don't know what all this other stuff is, but for the time being, we'll try to get these back in. Of course, I have no real way of knowing which side is supposed to be insulated, so I guess we'll just make a guess and we'll just get this on here. If it's wrong, we can always change it, obviously. We probably will have to anyway. But we'll just try to get this truck back together. Alright, so we got that done. I guess we'll take it over to the track and we'll see if this thing can actually power up. My expectations are pretty low, but let's try it out. I'm going to be very surprised if this locomotive does anything. I think in all likelihood it's probably either going to have a short circuit or it's not going to pick up any power because the wheels are so oxidized. But you know, I've been surprised by these types of project locomotives before. So let's give it a fair shake here and give it some power. And so far it does not seem to be doing anything. And now we appear to have a bit of a short circuit. So that's not so good. There's clearly something not quite right. Not terribly surprising, but we'll have to play around with the wires and everything else a little bit. So instead of trying to get this all sorted out, I think what I'm going to try to do is remove the roof and we'll see if we can get some leads directly on the motor. You know, we'll give us a much clearer picture of what exactly is going on with this locomotive. I've already got my lifelike controller all set up here. We'll get some power flowing through that. And I got some nice sparks there, so that should be good. And we'll just see. I can actually already notice that this spring has come undone, so that's obviously not going to work. So we'll get that back on there, and then we'll try to give it some power. I find these locomotives really exciting to work on because they're just such a mystery. You know, this is something that somebody at some point created. You know nothing about it, and you open it up and you just start to sort of learn the story of the locomotive. And there's something that I just find really fascinating about that. In any case, we'll get that connected up. I don't know if maybe this used to be a piece of insulator. It's a piece of metal of some sort. I don't know what that's about. But anyways, let's try to give this thing some power. My expectations are low, but we'll see here. Did you guys see that? It turned a tiny bit. All right, we're gonna give it more power, full 18 or so volts. No freaking way. This thing runs. Wow. And it doesn't even sound half bad. I mean, judging by how much power we're giving it, it probably has high current draw. But in comparison to some of the stuff I've worked on, that was really easy. So I guess what we're gonna try to do now is we'll try to sort the wiring out, figure out what's going on with all this stuff. And then once we do that, we'll drop the motor out. I think there are a couple screws right here which hold it in place, and then we can service the whole drive, get these really filthy wheels all cleaned up here. And hopefully by the end of this video, we will have this engine running for the first time in maybe 20 plus years, who knows. It could be longer. Like I said, this is quite an archaic locomotive. You just gotta love it though. I mean, check this out. Wood-bodied locomotive. Yeah, you know what they say, they don't make them like this anymore. So I thought about this, and I think I'm kind of doing it backwards. I think what I should be doing is actually dropping the motor out before working on the wiring, just because then we won't have to negotiate around all of this. So we're gonna have to get something to hold on to the nut on either side, which is holding the motor in place. I've got my trusty pliers here, and somebody was commenting recently saying, SMT, you need to replace these things, they're terrible. And you know, I'm not gonna lie, they've seen better days, but they actually belonged to my great-grandfather, and they still do the job perfectly. They're solid, they don't wiggle around, which I find some pliers do, and it's super annoying when you're trying to work on things like this. So as far as I'm concerned, I don't see any reason to get rid of them. But anyways, we'll see if we can get this out. It's a little bit awkward. You're probably supposed to remove the truck covers before doing this. And we'll see if we can get the other one off. This one's a little more stuck. All right, we've nearly done it here, folks. I think we're gonna have to desolder that. There we go. This thing actually does have some sort of a light fixture. That's super cool. I didn't notice that at first. So anyways, we've managed to get the drive freed, and despite how kind of grimy it is, this is actually turning really well, which is remarkable. Everything is in really good shape. So obviously, you know, I want to clean all this stuff up because we don't want this grime getting caught up in these gears. That wouldn't be good. But this is just a terrific sign. That means there's no buildup of rust or anything like that, which is, you know, one of the last things you want to see when working on a piece of equipment like this. Right there's the commutator. It's not looking perfect, but it's kind of to be expected for a locomotive of its age. So we'll use this fiberglass pencil just to polish that up, and we're gonna have a beautiful brass piece of metal by the end of this. Watch this. Just like a few seconds of using this tool, and it's already removing many layers of grime from years and years of usage. Just going to quickly clean out the gaps on the commutator using this plastic pick. You can find these things at pharmacies and places like that. I've had a lot of people asking me. But if you can't find them, just grab a regular toothpick and shave down the end a little bit. It will do the exact same job. But really the goal here is just to get any grime out of these gaps, which will cause a short circuit. And you just want to make sure you're using something which isn't too sharp, because it will, if this gets scratched, it will cause a lot of problems. Now, this thing was already running half decent before we even cleaned up the commutator, but I'm curious to see now that it actually has been properly cleaned, how well it's going to run. I mean, you would hope it would run better after that. You can hear as the motor starts to break in a little bit. And that's before we've even cleaned up and oiled all the rest of this, which I intend to do. So let's get to that. Just gonna try to scrape out some of this junk. We don't want that getting caught up in there. Oh, there's some 60-year-old dust right there. That's nice. See, this is exactly what you don't want, which is stuff getting caught around moving parts, because if that works its way into the bearings, it's gonna drag down the drive quite severely. Alright, so that's all looking a lot better. I think now I want to try to open up the gearbox, and we'll see how the grease and everything else in there is looking. I'm going to suspect it's probably kind of dry, but at the same time this whole drive is turning so well that it must be lubricating to some extent. Alright, so here we are inside. Honestly, there's not really any grease in here, which is not fantastic to see. But at the same time, it's not grimy or anything. It's all pretty clean. There's a little bit of old lubricant on here, and you know, this could affect how well power flows. So I'm going to clean all of this up right here. We'll make it all nice and shiny. But otherwise, everything in here is looking great. These parts don't have a lot of wear on them, so I think that this might be a low mileage locomotive. I'll just take some Q-tips and rubbing alcohol to clean all the old grease off. Oh man, just look at that. Well, at this point, I'm pretty happy with you know, what we've gotten out of the locomotive. It's this was the last one. You can see it's definitely a lot better. So I think at this point we can pretty much start reassembling everything. I do want to clean these wheels off first, though. Well, those didn't come out half bad in my opinion. I guess we'll try to get all of this back together. Cleaned up all of these other parts as well. I have a bearing around here, I need that. I'll just slowly put this thing back together, of course adding tons of oil to all these different moving parts. I find with metal engines which use metal gears, you really have to be mindful of adding oil and grease, because if you're not careful, these things can really wear down quickly. So after all that cleaning and re-lubrication, the drive is turning over almost effortlessly, which is really good. The magnet's not terribly strong, but I think it is going to run half decent. We'll connect some wires up here, and as you can see, the thing starts right up, you know, no problems. So at this point, I think we can reinstall this drive. I've left the truck covers off just so that it will be a little bit easier to get back inside the frame here. Unfortunately, I broke this wire off, so we're going to have to solder that back on, and we'll also have to resolder this, obviously. But now that I've also disassembled it, seeing that the insulators are on this side right here. So we just need to clean these wheels up, and this will hopefully work. Okay, so we've finally got that back in place. Getting those bolts back in was a pain in the neck, I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, now we can hopefully get this truck reassembled. Now, I was looking through the bag of spare parts here, and I found both of these pieces of metal, and I'm very confident that this went here, and this possibly went over that, which makes sense because as it would have been before, this would be too low, so that's great news. So yeah, we'll take this truck back apart. I'm gonna clean up those wheels properly. We'll clean up the journals just to make sure they're in good shape as well. And then yeah, we'll rewire it, and hopefully, if we're lucky, this thing will run. That looks about right. So that should stop the wheels from falling out as they have been. This side is insulated, so we want our insulated wheels on this side to be facing that way. So you can see there's the insulator. You got to make sure both those are opposite to the one on the other truck in this case. Now, I found this screw right here. It's a self-tapping screw, so I'm pretty sure that was probably what was there before. I think we'll just try to get this whole thing back together as is. Resolder it, throw the roof back on. As I said, if we are lucky, it might work. Looks about right. Alright, so we got it resoldered. This is really not ideal, but there's just not enough slack in this wire to recut and solder all of that, so unfortunately this is just going to have to do unless I want to rewire it. I really don't want to replace these wires. This whole braided stuff is just something you don't see anymore, and it still probably works fine, so you know what, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So we'll throw the roof back on this thing, we'll take it over to the track, and if we're lucky, this engine might just run again. And you know, you gotta just wonder how long it's been since this thing rode the rails. I mean, it's, judging by its condition, it's definitely been this way for a while. Alright, well, time for the moment of truth, I guess. I'm so unsure as to whether or not this thing is gonna start, you know? It's like everything theoretically is in order, but at the same time, I'm still not 100% sure why it was shorted to begin with. But in any case, let's give it some power and see what happens. And we've got a working headlight, but the engine doesn't seem to want to go. That's weird. We've got low current draw. Something's not quite right here. But if we just... Okay, I can hear it now. Oh. Okay, it's not great, but that is something now. Yeah, it's starting to go. She's pulling an amp though, that's way too much power. Let's see, it might start to drop. Oh, yeah, it's starting to speed up. It's getting there. Current draw is coming down. It's almost at exactly where it's supposed to be. Yeah, check this thing out. That's so cool. Uh-oh. I hope it didn't just seize. No, we lost power again. I'm so happy to see it running around the layout. Well, it was running. There we go. It's got some sort of a problem, I think, with the brushes, but other than that, like, it's doing it. And the current draw, it's right in check. It's high for a regular locomotive, but for an engine of its era with an open frame motor like that, it's very common, so that's perfect. So yeah, I think at this point we can say we have got a runner. See if it makes it over this time. Yes, there we go. It's getting better by the minute. So I'm just gonna let this thing run around for probably 5 minutes, let it really break in, let the lubricants flow around, and if we're lucky, the current draw might even drop a little further. But yeah, this is just fantastic. An engine, you know, over 60 years old, and it's running pretty smooth. Yeah, it's definitely getting better. Wow. So the low speed leaves a little bit to be desired, and still seems to be getting a bit stuck there, so I don't know what's going on with that. Again, I think it might be a problem with one of the brushes. But let's get a coupler on this thing and let it pull a little bit of freight, or maybe some passenger cars. So I've gone and put together some sort of a train. It's not great. I mean, it's a bunch of different cars from different railroads, and the time periods are also not perfect, but it's about the best I could do. I think they look all right together. So let's run this thing as a train now. Well, folks, that's going to be about it for today's video. I hope you all enjoyed. I'm absolutely thrilled with how well this thing turned out. For a locomotive of its age and in its current condition, it runs remarkably well. Just from breaking in, it's actually got its low speed back. You know, earlier it couldn't really creep, but now if we give it just a few volts of power, it will creep along just fine, which is just remarkable. You know, even when these things were brand new, they wouldn't have been the greatest because they hadn't developed skew wound motors, or they at least weren't very common. So for what it is absolutely remarkable that it can go that slow, and it's a sign that the drive is in very healthy condition. You know, same with the current draw, it's just where you want it. So overall, for a $25 random kit bash locomotive, you really can't complain with that. It's just amazing too how well they built these things. All it took was a little bit of cleaning and lubrication, and we've got this thing back on the rails, and I don't really see any reason why it won't be around for another 50 years, provided it's taken care of. So I think that that's quite excellent. But anyways, I hope you all enjoyed, and with that, I'd like to thank you all so much for watching.